Okay, is it okay? It's recording now. Okay, hi everyone. Today we will be talking about the state of deployment and deployment scripts and basically how to deploy things. This will be about deploying the Python applications. As you all know, we are currently moving to the OVH infrastructure, so I will show you what's there at the moment. Let me share my screen maybe. Okay, so you should be seeing this right now. Okay, so basically what we have at the OVH is what's called the public cloud, and we have two projects on the OVH public cloud. One is called Digital Fleet, and this is the one I'm working on right now. The other is there is also digital mobility, where digital mobility front end is running, but we'll stick to the digital fleet for now. What we have there, basically you're using two of those things for now. So we have, if we look into instances, we have a instance, a Debian running in Warsaw. Not a very big one, but it's enough for now. Right, you can see it's not a very, it's quite bigger than the one we are using for the digital fleet backend at Amazon, but it's still a small one. And also we have object storage, containers for media files, and for, well, we don't really use media files for now, but the private data is trip data and shape data and so on. So those are the two things from all of these crazy settings here that we're actually using. One thing to have in mind also is that if you want to set up an instance on the public cloud, you need to upload your public SSH key first, and then ask for the key. It doesn't really give you the password, you just give it the key and set up the instance. It's basically the same way as in Amazon here. Okay, so we'll take a look at what happens at the instance itself. I've actually defined it so it's easier for me to SSH. So it's a trick that you might want to learn. You don't want every time to configure to type SSH Debian at whatever IP it is. You just define it in your config. So it's like that, right? Okay. Yeah. So what we have here. So first of all, if you have a web application, you need to have a web server. So we have an Nginx here. So we'll take a look at that first. What we are doing here. So this is fairly standard Nginx installations. So we will just take a look at what we changed here. So the first thing is we actually only using HTTPS for everything, right? So it's 2020, it's time we encrypt everything. So we can see there's a small configuration file for which says, okay, so for HTTP port, for port 80, what you do is redirect all of the traffic to HTTPS and only leave this path as HTTP. So this is the path that is used by Let's Encrypt to automate the generating of the SSL certificates. So we are using Let's Encrypt certificates for that. It runs automatically. So if you create a certificate for a a certain domain, it then uses that. There's a service which renews the certificates when it's needed. So we don't really need to care about that any more than just setting this small file and just forgetting about Let's Encrypt while it's trying. And then also about HTTPS. The other thing which we're using is something Mozilla provides. Mozilla provides this SSL configurator helper, which is something like that. If you Google Mozilla SSL, you will find it. So basically, what it does is you define your software, your versions, basically of your software, and some options, and then it gives you the configuration that you need. So basically, you can paste it into your configuration, so you can get like correct, up-to-date, secure configuration of your server. The intermediate level is fine for most purposes. So the levels mean that if we go for modern level, that would mean that some older clients won't be able to connect. If we go for old level, it would mean that we compromise security to let people with like Android 2 connect. So intermediate is fine. People won't complain about intermediate. So if someone can't complain in this, if someone can't connect in this configuration, that means they absolutely need to upgrade their software or hardware. So this is fairly simple. You just paste it in. Basically, it's the Mozilla defined ciphers and some general. So most of those settings aren't really touched. So the configurations are here. So right now, what we have here are two things. So we have the digital fleet backend and the map matching server, which here is running under maps digital fleet EU domain, because I didn't really have a simple way of changing the Viva Drive DNS settings. So I just set it up under this URL for now. If we look into that, we will see how it works. So we can see that it only listens on HTTPS here, so we don't really concern ourselves with HTTP anymore. And it just defines the server name, the Let's Encrypt certificates, which are generated in a standard way using certbot, which is standard package in Debian right now. So you can just use certbot and generate your certificates. And what it does here is, what it says is here. So for static and media files, those are just served statically. So those are just files on disk, right? The static files are the styles and the JavaScripts and everything that doesn't need to be run on the backend. It just served. So it's served directly by Nginx, right? So Nginx just reads those files from disks and serves it without going through any application, which is the correct configuration. You don't want your application in the way, and also Nginx is very good at serving static files. So it should be, and this should be like that. And then it says, okay, everything apart from those paths, like static and media, so everything apart, everything else goes to the application through this Unix socket, right? So there's a path to a socket where the application is running. So for each application, you basically need a file like that defining what should be served statically and where to find the application. Okay, so where is the application actually running? Well, for running the application, we use something called gunicorn, which is the Python WSGI runner. And it is managed by a process manager called Supervisor. So if we go to Supervisor, so Supervisor is, again, a package you may just install in your Debian or Ubuntu or whatever. Supervisor is basically a service which runs services. So it's like lightweight service manager. It's lightweight because it's all happening in user space, and basically it just runs processes and makes sure they don't die and are not respawned. So here we have a directory again. For each application, supervisor needs a simple configuration file, which just says something like that. Okay, what do you run? So there's a command which runs gunicorn. So there's a path to the gunicorn. We will see why it looks this way. It's we have the Unix socket path under which we want this gunicorn to serve the application. So gunicorn creates this socket, and on the other side, nginx connects to this socket, and this is the way the application is communicated to the web server. So we're using Unix socket just to, this could be TCP socket, like local port as well, but Unix socket are slightly, have slightly less overhead, so it's nicer. And it runs, and this is here we have some options, right? So you can look at the gunicorn manual, but those aren't, well, I think those are fairly understandable, right? The timeouts, the number of workers, some names, and path to the log files. This is the Python path to the application. So we have a directory defined here, right? Directory where the application actually lives, and starting with this directory, we defined a Python path to the application, which is the WSGI application, which is basically created by Django standard like project skeleton, right? You have a WSG file there. So once you have that running, you can see that those are running, right? There's a supervisor control command line tool for like starting, stopping, restarting, and so on. Then you have your application running on the socket, and nginx reads that from the socket and serves it to the internet. So this is fine. So the last thing that we need to look at is actually deploying the app, right? Okay, so I will. Any questions about this general like stuff, or is it all clear?
I would ask not you, Radek, but all the other people. Did you ever do that yourself? I mean, is it completely new to you, or you have some experience with this kind of stuff?
I tried to do it like this when I was learning AWS. It's a similar to like a AWS, like right, right, Radek?
Yeah, it's not specific of OVH, so it's you can do that at any Unix or Linux server. So there are no tools specific to OVH here, right? Okay. So those are just regular Linux tools for deployment. So
like in AWS, when we create an instance, they provide us some key code to download in our laptop, and on the basis of this key code, you can log into to your by your console. There is also some system like this in OVH.
I don't really know about codes because you have you have something like virtual console in the AWS dashboard, but yeah. I don't really use that. What I use is just as plain SSH.
Yeah, I also SSH, but when you create instances, they provide you some key, yeah? That
you provide it with a key.
Yeah.
Normally, you create your key.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we can go back to that. Just take a look. If you go to the OVH dashboard, to the public cloud, what you have here is, well, is the SSH keys, right?
Right.
And here you add your SSH, your public key, basically.
Okay.
Right? So then when you go to instances and you want to create a new instance, you just choose your key and it's automatically installed to the instance, right?
Ah, okay.
It's in some, let's see. Like process. I use Debian mostly here because it's more stable and because with I like Debian release cycle on servers more than Ubuntu, so that's the only reason I'm doing that. Because on Ubuntu you have to choose or to either use a very old, like long-term support version, or remember to upgrade every half a year. So it's crazy. But here you can, as you can see, you can just select your key, right?
Yes, right.
And it will be installed for the default user.
Okay.
Right, and then if you want, what it does basically is on the server, you have this default Debian user. What actually selecting the key does is it uploads to your key to this .ssh authorized keys file. It's just like plain text pasted here. So what you want to do if you want to add some new key or change your key or add a new user and allow them to use the key, allow someone to log into the user with some key. You basically add all of those keys to this .ssh/authorized key file, right? So this is standard SSH file location for basically public keys that are allowed to log into this particular user. Okay.
Thank you.
Again, this is not specific to OVH here. It's just standard SSH stuff.
Anyone else that had some experience with this setting up?
Well, I did the whole thing, I think 2 weeks ago when we set it up for OVH, but it was also only the first time. So I didn't do supervisor, but I think system control or something. Yes.
Okay, so you probably will want, if you want to do any Python's deployments, you probably want to become like accustomed to some of these tools. So those are supervisor is the process manager. G-Unicorn is the WSG server. So this is the thing that actually runs the Python code. And Nginx, or well, you could use Apache instead of Nginx. I'm just using Nginx because it's
yeah, we will probably make because now we are on VPS, but when we are done with the first version, we will probably move to public cloud. So you will have opportunity to set it up again.
Yeah, so this works the same. It's on VPS. So basically, this instance that I'm showing you is actually public cloud instance. So there's no difference there.
For me, it's
I think there's a slight
difference because we have a free credit on public cloud, and for VPS we pay.
Yeah, okay. I think there's a slight difference in the way you actually create the instance, but later it's just the same standard Linux instance. So yeah, you want to know about that. Okay, and and another tool I was talking about is the Let's Encrypt. Let's Encrypt actually provides you with this certbot tool, which you can use to create certificates. So once you get used to that, it's fairly straightforward. And again, for each domain, you only need to run it once, and then it handles the renewal itself in the background automatically. So you only need to make sure that it creates it successfully. So again, for what I use for creating certificates is actually this. It has some engine. I was talking to Jan about this. It has some Nginx automation built in as a plugin, but I don't use that. What I use is this cert only, something like that. And here's the domain. So what it does is basically says, okay, use this directory to confirm that we actually have the domain under control and create certificates for this domain, right? So then it's like something like that. It will say, oh, it says that actually, you know, we have the certificate already, right? Well, we can try to renew it just to show it. What it does is it creates a file, like a secret file in this directory, and then tells the Let's Encrypt certificate authority to check for existence of that file under where it should be on this domain. And if it checks out, it gives you the certificate. So basically, it created the certificate right now. So that's it, right? Okay. So now to the any questions again, because we'll be going to the applications now, if it's fine. Okay.
Okay.
Okay, just take a look at because we were taking a look at the maps here. So this we were talking about. There's a similar one for the digital fleet itself. There's a slight difference here, and I will be talking, well, I might just talk about it now. So with the map matching server, it's fairly easy. It just points to this server and it runs, and that's it. With digital fleet, we have a slight complication here because on the same domain name, like digital fleet EU, we have actually two applications running, right? We have the front-end application, which is something Rahul was working on always, and we have the backend application, right? So, for example, if we go to digital fleet, right? This goes to the front-end application, right? What you see is the front-end application. But if you go to digital fleet API or digital, well, it's not admin, let's say, right? This this goes to the backend application, right? So there's an overlap, and we need to be able to manage that. So the way it's set up right now is the backend application is running here on the OVH instance, and it's just but there's a lot of configuration routing specific URLs to specific applications, and this is not good, right? There's too much configuration here. So what we want to do basically is scrap that and separate those domains. So you would have the backend running under something like API Digital Fleet EU, and the front end just on Digital Fleet EU. But this is, I didn't change that because it had some side effects on, you know, it needs to be changed in various places too, like in the front end, probably in the app at some point. So I didn't touch that, but this is something I need to do just to separate that, just to simplify the configuration here. So the way it goes right now is the digital fleet traffic goes first to the AWS instance where the front end still is installed, for where Rahul's front end runs, right? And then the request to the backend can go here and be served from the OVH server. So it runs, it's just too complex, and we need to simplify that. Okay, let's go now. Let's see how the applications are actually deployed. So we have, the application live in the /srv directory, which is standard Unix place for placing like services. So we have a directory per service here. If you go, and we will check the layout here. So it's too much. We don't need the dot files. Let's just look at those. Okay, so what happens here? We can just take a look first and how the application code looks like, because it's a little different. So when you create the Django application, you get something like that, right? You have your manage by, you have your application directories. This is actually the project directory here. What I do when I actually work on Django code is I put the actual Django code in the SRC, like source directory, and then there are some accompanying files for that. So the two are relevant here: the requirements file, which is you probably should know about, right? It just defines the requirements, and also there's a make file. How many of you have used a make or created a make file before?
I have.
Yeah. So this is like very, very standard traditional tool, right? So I'm not using any fancy new tooling here. I'm just using like old style, like 80s make files, which work fine. They need some magic here, but they work. So basically, what I want to do, what I want to achieve here, is to separate the knowledge about what do you need to deploy this application, this particular application, from the knowledge about how the deployment is organized on the server, right? Because the same application can be deployed in different ways, and those are like separate concerns. So the interesting part is here with the make deploy command. If you've ever seen a makefile or read a makefile, you can see that what it means is for deployment, you actually need to provide this file, local settings file, right? This is the file which provides you with the local environment, like database access and so on, like keys for Firebase, stuff like that, depending on the application. Here, it's mostly just database access. So it says, when you have this file, the local settings.py file, to deploy, you basically need to do three things. You need to install your requirements from the requirements file. You need to migrate your database, and you need to collect your static files to place them so that the web server can serve them, right? So nothing crazy here. But if you actually look what happens here on the deployment side, you have some different directories here. So the actual application lives in there's this directory called releases. If you look at the current release, this is where the application is living. This is actually the code of the application, and it has the local settings.py file here. So how does it happen? Well, basically, what we have another make file here, which you don't really have to read that much, because it's basically the same for all the Python deployments that you will ever need. It's something I wrote some time ago. So we could do something. Let's change to this maps user. Right? What we can do is just make release. Just we will look at what happens here. What this make release does is it created a new release, like in the release directory. So what it does is basically gets the current date as the release identifier. It creates a new release, so it's actually a shallow Git clone. If you don't know what a shallow Git clone is, it's basically a clone which doesn't really pull all of the history of the project, but it's basically a Git clone. So it creates a shallow Git clone in a new directory. it makes sure the virtual env exists where it should. So we have this virtual env here. Do you know what the virtual env here is? Do you know basically? Is anyone who's using Python not doesn't? Is there anyone who uses Python and doesn't use virtual envs? Because you should.
I don't.
Yeah, you should. You don't know what it is?
Nope.
Okay, so basically, virtual env is a very useful tool. It's actually, it was a third-party package in Python 2. It's built in Python 3. So I won't be talking much about that. Just pointing you. We don't really use pipenv, but we are using. It's called virtual environment. It's built in Python 3. Basically, it lets you create a separate space for your packages for each project, right? If you have on your machine 2 separate projects and you want to be able to have a separate sets of packages installed, like for example, for one project you might use Django 2.2 and on another project you might use Django 3, right? Then what you do to separate that away is you create a virtual env and you put these packages inside your virtual env. So basically what we do here is for each application, we have a virtual env created. So the application uses basically everything Python needs for this application lives in this virtual env, right? This is also this way we can use like various Python versions in different projects, so we can upgrade them independently. That's why if we looked at like here, what we have here is we can see that the G unicorn is actually in the virtual env, right? The Python WSG runner is installed in the virtual env also. So basically, you install everything in the virtual env. Okay, so it make a release directory. It created a virtual env. I just made sure that the wheel is installed. You can see that the way you install things into the virtual env is just by using pip from inside the virtual env, right? So in here, okay. Then again, there's it installs any requirements that you might want locally. You can see that we have this directory here for local settings. And there's a separate requirements file which just says, okay, we want unicorn, we want Postgres library, and we want IPython. Do you know what IPython is? Because it's cool too. IPython is the Python interpreter which is much more friendly than the default one. So you want to use IPython. Actually, Django is configured in a way by default that if there is IPython installed, it will use that instead of regular Python in the Django shell. So you want to use IPython for your projects. It has much better like history management, line editing, so on, tab completion. It has a lot of cool features. You want to use that. So it installs the local requirements into the virtual env, and then just does this make deploy thing, right? It does it in a weird magic way here. We will see why. But basically what it does is this deploy, right? So it just goes to the new release and does all the things that need to be done in this app. So that's it. We will look at what this magic thing is in a moment. But after it's done, it just links this new release as the current release and restarts the application. Okay, this is the etc directory with this local configuration. We can see 3 files here. One is the requirements we were looking at, right? The other thing was there's this. So okay, just to make it clear, you don't really need to touch that make file. You don't really need to edit that. It's basically there to be able to do the make release, but you don't want to change anything here normally unless you know it's doing something wrong. But the way you actually configure your environment for deployment is you have this deployment configuration file, which is basically says which Python you want to use, where do you want your virtual env to be, and what's the supervisor task to restart called for this application. So again, you want to do that only one time when you install the application. Yeah. And as you can see, we have also the local settings file here, which is Django local settings, right? So those are some, that's just some local settings. And there's a magic script here, which you don't want to probably be toying around about. You can read that and see if you understand what's happening here, but you don't need to edit that. What it does is a piece of magic which does the following thing. When you do the make deploy, this is the make deploy line. When you do the make deploy, which is this command from the application, when you do the make deploy, this magic script says, okay, if there is a file that you need and you don't have it, then look for it in this etc directory. So basically what it does is when you do the deployment, it creates a release and then copies the needed file from the etc directory to the relevant to the place they need to be. Right. So here we were running that. So basically this little, it doesn't really say what it's doing here, but basically this little script is what makes sure that this file is copied to this file, right? So you don't need to do that by hand. All right, okay, fine. And also one last thing, I will show you how this runs like in a whole. One last thing, where the release comes from is a Git directory, a Git repository locally. So there's it's a bare Git repository, and it has a hook which says when there is a push to this directory, we make a release. So the idea is that the way this is set up right now, if you do a push from your local machine to this repository, it will just make the deployment. Okay, any questions at this point? Oh, let's see, let's change something.
Too easy, Radek, too easy.
Yeah, there'll be a lot to, the idea is it's probably a little complex to go over at this point, but it translates to a fairly straightforward experience when you deploy. So the idea, we need to be able to change some. Well, let's just add something. Let's just, as you can see, in my local copy of the map matching service, I have a remote called OVH, which just points to this repository. And if I do the push to the OVH of the master branch, what happens is it just deploys. Okay, is it clearer now? So what it did is it did the push to the Git repository on the server, then the Git hook runs make release, and then the make release install over everything that's needed, create a new release, and deploys it. Right? Okay, so also one other thing here. One other thing we have here is we have this manage.py script here, which is not a real manage.py. It's just like a very simple helper, which runs the correct manage.py from the current application. So I don't really need to go to the release current source directory. I can do like this from like here, right? And it runs. Okay. One other funny thing, let's about actually setting all this up. All of this structure needs to be set up. What I do is I have a little script for that also. So let's just try and do that. Let's add a new remote. Let's add okay. So I've just added a new Git remote on my local machine. Can you see that? I've added a remote called other, and the address is this. The user maps at the server, and there's a path for a directory which doesn't really exist, right? So there's no other maps here. So I have this fancy little script. I have a fancy little script which actually creates all the structure. Oh, I don't. It's funny. Let's do it differently because I need sudo for that. Yeah, because the problem is that yeah, I will be talking about that in a moment too. The problem is that I need root rights, administrative rights to create this directory here, and I don't have it. So let's just create this other maps. Okay, I've just created a empty directory for the other maps, and I have still this this remote called other, which doesn't really exist yet. So what I do is this deploy setup script. Right, it's run. It did run, and it uploaded everything we need here. If I don't push to this directory, it complains about configuration not being correct, but I can just go to my configuration directory and set all of those paths. Correctly. So it complains. It's not actually. So this is something you need to learn about virtual and how to create that. But basically now what it does is it's all there, right? Obviously it complains. It complains that there is no local settings file. and also there is no other maps supervisor task. So because I didn't set that up and I didn't provide the configuration file, but basically it just runs. Okay. And the same way we have exactly the same script is used for the digital fleet. So the structure is the same here. So I will be posting all the scripts that you need to our repository because they are not there yet. So you can test that. But basically the idea is that at the point when you have the application deployed this way, you can just push to the Git repository and it just deploys. Okay, any questions now?
Rahul, do you know everything already?
You won't know
No, I'm
everything
just,
right now, but
because it's now too fast. So just
yeah,
I will go through the videos and I will try to note down every point.
yeah, of course. The way I'm approaching this is, of course, you will not be able to just read all the code like during the call and understand what's happening. The idea is that it's recorded. You can just go back to it, and I just want to cover some ground with this.
Yeah, so that's why I will go through video tomorrow, or if you will upload now, then I will make a note and then I can understand everything.
Yeah.
I will try to upload after the call.
Thank you.
Okay, so I think we can probably stop right now, and there will be more stuff about deployment and about OVH infrastructure, specifically about map matching, but I think we should do that separately.
Yeah, there will be quite some meetings. I think. Yeah, we have a list, so I want to make sure we cover everything.
Yeah, but this is basically the main the main process for deploying the Django apps, Python in general.
Okay, Radek, can you stay a bit longer because we wanted to have a chat with Josipa about the geotab?
Yeah, sure.
So we can stay for another 10 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
And Jan, I will give you a call later when we finish.
Okay.
And I'll go through video, and Radek, if I will have some question, I will write to you on Slack. Okay.
Okay, sure. Yeah.
Thank you.
Perfect. Okay, I will stop recording.